Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Crowds and Machines, the Next Level. Our webinar today delves into what we think is a very exciting world of crowds and machines, a unique approach to map, measure, and monitor the effects of climate change on food security and other issues of strategic interest. Mapping observations often lack precision, depth, and meaning. And today, we intend to demonstrate how remote crowd-based observations and machine learning can enhance information systems so that they can inform policy practice and strategic decision-making. Understanding the impacts of climate change is crucial for the development of effective adaptation and mitigation policies. And this webinar today provides insights into how a unique combination of crowdsourced analytics, advanced data technologies, such as satellite imagery and machine learning, and also strategic analysis can support the development of smarter climate change policies and programs. Crowds and Machines is a project created by BlackShore, 52 Impact, and the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, and it is supported by the European Space Agency. My name is Laura Birkman, and I'm the head of the Climate Change and Security Program of the Hague Center for Strategic Studies. And today I'm joined by Hans van Woud from BlackShore and Koen Verberne from 52 Impact. So what will we do today? To start things off, I will set the scene and elaborate a bit on why we started Crowds and Machines, our objectives, and broader approach. Koen will then dive in a bit more deeply into the technology side of things and provide more details about the possibilities that AI and machine learning plays in our work. And then Hans will provide a demonstration of the gaming platform and crowdsourced techniques we use to develop our unique mapping products. Finally, we hope to discuss some of the key takeaways of the project and the potential that it brings for technology and policy. The idea is then to open the floor for a broader discussion and answer any questions you may have. And we encourage you to participate by submitting any questions to the Q&A in the chat. So let's begin. Allow me by starting to set the scene. Why did we band together to form Crowds and Machines? And what is the unique approach that we came up with in order to develop our ideas? We're facing enormous societal challenges fueled by four key trends: climate change, geopolitical competition, resource scarcity, and growing populations. Crucially, the gap between the supply and demand of water, food, and energy resources is widening. As a result, there are increasing concerns that future generations may become less well off than we are, socially, economically, politically, and environmentally. And the war in Ukraine has brought home that apart from energy autonomy, we need to rethink our food security. As many wheat importing countries in Northern Africa and the Middle East were directly hit in their food supply, bringing back difficult memories of the root causes of the Arab Spring. Governments, businesses, academics, and civil society organizations around the world are working hard to get a grip on many of these challenges. However, marred by ad hoc realities, they often lack the capabilities to think systematically and act coherently. So the good news is that we have better access to information than ever before. We have satellites that can observe the Earth's surface with incredible accuracy, and the amount of Earth observation data at our fingertips has drastically increased. We live in an age where AI is getting increasingly advanced and even surpassing our expectations. However, the methods deployed to interpret and scale satellite information are still in their infancy and very costly. What if we could develop a system that acts as a catalyst to enhance these methods and at the same time help to tackle some of our great societal challenges? Enter Crowds and Machines, a project that uses satellite information in a unique way to support policymakers and technology experts to design smarter interventions to mitigate some of the negative impacts of climate change without needing to validate that information on the ground. Crowds and Machines was first launched in the summer of 2020, right after the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. There were increasing concerns that the pandemic could cause harvesting and logistic issues and could lead to food shortages, as I described before. And this was also the case in Europe. Therefore, we set out to show how collaboration between man, i.e. the crowd, and machine, artificial intelligence, can work together in ways that really provide unique and strategic insights. So using a gaming platform, we invited people around the world to help us map crops and other strategic objects in specific areas in Italy and Ethiopia. Specifically, using the latest machine learning techniques, we then mapped, monitored, and measured the rate of productions of cereals and other crops in these countries in the period 2016 to 2021. And our aim was to observe whether the COVID-19 pandemic impacted yields and the harvesting potential. Ultimately, we demonstrated that the method can be used to complement ongoing field work that is often costly, time-consuming, and reliant on fragmented information. Moreover, since data could be collected, interpreted, and scaled remotely, we learned that it can be applied to regions that are far removed, difficult to reach, and even dangerous to enter, providing important possibilities for businesses, IGOs, NGOs, and other stakeholders operating in those parts of the world. Last year, the European Space Agency supported our proposal for a follow-up project called Crowds and Machines, the Next Level. And as its name suggests, this project takes things further. And more specifically, we set out to scale our monitoring efforts from Ethiopia and Italy to the entire Mediterranean region because of the key role this region plays for food production and its increasingly vulnerability to heat stress, drought, and other impacts of climate change. We also, using the power of crowd analytics, set out to develop even more detailed maps of wheat and other strategic crops grown in more subregions around this region. And finally, we wanted to really look at providing open source labeled data sets for training machine learning systems about the findings of the crowd. So here we are, nearly 1 year later, to tell you more about our results and about our major takeaways. Over to Koen, who will explain some of the new innovations we developed to support machine learning systems.
Thank you, Laura. And now I will try to share my screen. Let's see if it works. Laura, can you confirm that you see my screen? Just a check.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so thank you all for being here and to share some of our findings related to climate change impact and the role of data technologies. Maybe a disclaimer, data technologies will not solve everything related to climate change. It's really about insights, and a lot of extra work needs to be done to solve all issues. What I will do is today show a bit of the landscape, part of the landscape, I have to say, about some technology drivers related to climate change impact, and also go deeper into actually the project we did with the European, or are doing with the European Space Agency related to crowds and machines. So first of all, some examples of how climate change impacts businesses, but also public organizations. So more and more we see that corporates are preparing for climate change with new types of strategies, mitigation strategies, for example. And of course, public organizations that are developing and implementing policies to prepare for climate change. So here's just some examples. There are, of course, many more. But things that also we see as fit to impact as some important domains are water availability, water consumption that changes due to climate change. Think about trends in precipitation changes annually, but also seasonally. In some cases, we see, for example, peaks of precipitation, but on the other hand, also droughts that are peaking. Temperature changes is an obvious thing that also impacts water consumption and eventually also water availability for different organizations. Think about farms in the same watershed. Second thing is extreme weather events, sort of the frequency of certain weather events. Think again about droughts or heavy rains. We see that frequency changes, but also severity changes. Same applies to ocean level rise and flooding, especially near the ocean, but also near rivers. We see a riverine flooding where, due to climate change, things change for businesses and also public organizations, also citizens, by the way. Some key impacts that we see is that supply chains are changing. For example, sourcing locations where certain crops come from. In the near future, we see it already happening, is that some spots where certain crops came from are no longer suitable to get the same type of crops, or we can see that we expect a change of locations where certain crops come from. What we also see is that this is more related to corporates. I think is in the field of environmental, social, and governance, ESG, and reporting about the impact of businesses, corporates on their direct environment, but also how they mitigate certain climate change risks. This become more and more important for corporates to report, for example, to governments, but also to investors, for example, and also last but not least, their direct clients. So our main thesis and what we see happening is that we see an increase in awareness of organizations that they are exposed to climate risks. And at the same time, we see that many organizations struggle with the right tools and data to actually assess their risks and then also to mitigate those. And this can have severe consequences. Again, think about supply chain disruptions, but also raw valuation of assets. This is, for example, for investors important. Think about the investor in agricultural areas. And in general, just high unexpected costs related to risks that were just not accounted for. And here we really see that there is an important role for what we call advanced data technologies or innovative data technologies that really changes this landscape. So multiple types of data technologies, and just to be sure, this is just some examples. There is, you can tell about just data technologies, I think, for hours even. I will do it in 10 minutes. So I just want to highlight some key aspects that are important from our point of view related to providing climate insights. Maybe good to mention here, we are more focusing on what we call watershed level, or think about subnational level, what's happening related to climate change. We even can go to a scale of asset level. Think about the risks related to a certain production side of a corporate. That's really also what we can do. This is not about what's happening, for example, in a factory. So how can you do, for example, more with water efficiency? There are also data technologies for that, but this is more about understanding the impact of the climate impact on a watershed and how that affects the stakeholders and the organizations in that watershed. So first of all, satellite data. Satellite data is already literally used for decades, but we see really a boost in the last 5 or 10 years with application of satellite data. And one of the drivers is that there are just more satellites launched, and so there's more satellite data available, especially also open access satellite data, so they are free to use. You have to be a little bit careful. They are free to use these data, but you have to do something to the data, which you call data processing, to actually extract the information from these satellite images. But at least the raw data, so to speak, is free of charge. One primary advantage is that you have frequent and remote monitoring of basically any location in the world. So these satellites are orbiting the planet Earth, and in that way we get information of every spot on the Earth. And frequently, think about once every some days, you get an update based on the satellite that's coming over your area. Even with only using public available satellite data, you can already have this the frequency of a matter of days. So you don't need expensive satellite imagery for that. Then there is archive data. So since the 80s, there's satellite data, and it helps a lot to provide trends. So when we start a project, we can already create a data set since the 80s and see all types of trends related, for example, to how the landscape changed, how much of the area is used by agriculture, what the water consumption is of these agricultural areas, also things like precipitation, temperature, that kind of data products. They are available for decades, and that provides a lot of insights into what's happening in a certain area related to climate. It's a cost-efficient way. A satellite is very expensive, but it's already paid for by basically the taxpayer. So this means that it's very cost-efficient to use this data source, and it's scalable. When you have a system, you can basically apply it everywhere. Second thing I wanted to highlight here is the availability of open data sets besides satellite data that's available, especially universities, knowledge institutes, but also public organizations. Think about governments are providing data sets, putting it online, and basically anybody can use those data sets. And from our point of view, this has really accelerated in the last some years. This provides a lot of extra data that can help a lot to get the insights that you need related to climate. So think about crop-specific data, but also demographic data or soil data, for instance. The machine learning. So you have all this data, but the key thing is to extract the information that you need. And machine learning is actually a way of training an algorithm to extract the data that is needed. Think about where can we find weed, where can we find water bodies, for example. There are really good ways of training an algorithm to search through satellite imagery to find these spots. Then integration with climate models. So we are not only interested in the current situation, the past situation, but also into the future. So for that, we use climate models, which are not developed by companies like BlackShore, 50 Impact, or HCSS, but we use the models that are developed by the scientific community and that are also used by, for example, the IPCC. With that, you can even go 100 years. You get a projection for the coming 100 years if you want that. Normally, we go 10, 20, or 30 years ahead of time. And there are other types of what we call innovative data approaches, for example, crowdsourcing and gamification. Hans will, in a moment, go a little bit deeper into that. And that provides new ways of acquisition, processing, visualization of information. So something about the machine learning part of crowds and machines. You can do a lot of things with machine learning. It is a very powerful set of technologies and techniques, but we always need training and validation data to actually train our algorithms. Our algorithms need to know how a tree looks like in a satellite. It needs to know how water looks like. It needs to know whatever you want to find in your data set. And for that, you need data, and that's what we call training data. And as Hans will show, there is a BlackShore gaming platform where actually the crowd can generate this data by annotating hexagons or triangles in satellite imagery. For us as a company, we then use that data to actually train our algorithms. And we had all types of challenges within the project that was mentioned by Laura, funded by the European Space Agency, to use this data for the purpose of training the machine learning algorithms. And the good thing is that there are plenty of opportunities to use this type of data sets, and that really gives a lot of opportunities to train these machine learning based algorithms and then also upscale it to larger areas. We used multiple machine learning techniques, so that is that you can actually use the type of algorithms for different type of machine learning techniques. Here I mentioned 3 of those, and eventually we will also publish them online so that everybody can use the algorithms that we developed and can hopefully easily use those type of algorithms to use the crowdsourced generated training data to train the algorithms and then upscale to larger areas. Yeah, that was my part of the presentation. Hans, can you please continue?
Yes, thank you, Koen, and thank you, Laura, for the first part, for the introduction. And indeed, I will right now take over how we utilize our crowdsourcing gaming platform to generate all those data labels. So allow me to start sharing my screen also. Here it is. Okay, can you still hear me? I can't see you, but Koen, can you verify if you hear me?
I hear you, but we cannot see your presentation.
Oh, you can't see that? Oh, wait, sorry. And then, of course, you should see it now.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, okay, well, welcome to this webinar, and let's just get started on my end. And of course, this is a collaboration between 52 Impact, the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, and BlackShore, of which I am the founding CEO. And this project is supported by the European Space Agency. And let's get started. And probably this image is familiar with you. And often, if you have to log into a website, you have to click on cars or traffic lights, or you have to click on doors or whatever. And it is a sort of a CAPTCHA code, and this code is needed to log in. But secretly, you're also doing something else. You're teaching a machine, or you're training something to recognize traffic light systems, so you can drive your Tesla autonomously eventually. So it is a form of crowdsourcing. However, sometimes you're a little bit in doubt, are you clicking it right or not? But we do it a little bit differently. Well, yeah, what you do, of course, for machine learning, you're sending a lot of examples of images into a system, in a cloud system like animals here. So yeah, animals can be recognized automatically. But let's go to our system. What we are doing in a computer game engine, which we have built, we're inserting very high resolution satellite imagery. You can zoom into 30 centimeters already right now. And we ask the players in the game to explore those areas. And while doing so, the people together are exploring. We combine all of the data, and the output of this data are maps or data labels. And you can use it for all sorts of purposes, of course. So how exactly does it work? Well, here we see an image of our computer game, and this is an area of Rhodos. This is a satellite image captured shortly after the wheat harvest of 2021. And so it is different data than Google Earth. The data is really, it is matching our task at hand, which is about wheat harvesting. And we asked people, well, what do you see in the image? And while teaching the crowd a little bit of what we are looking for, then the players can start to generate outputs. For example, in this case, we asked people, okay, can you map harvested wheat, which you can see from space, but also other things like olive orchards, can you see vegetation? Do you see windmills or energy grids like solar panels? And in this case, also tourism in this area. Well, the crowd is mapping, and all data is being turned into information, into knowledge. Now, the first application of our crowdsourcing platform, which I call Cerberus, the first applications were actually to generate maps that should be human readable. And it are just maps for people like mayors or decision makers to look at the maps and see what is going on in the area. And in this case, it is like a investment impact map, what we have made. But the reader here is a human like you and me. However, what he found out over the time that, of course, machines, AI systems are coming up, they are on the rise. And AI systems are also really good at image recognition by seeing features in images and can help us to generate maps. But what is important for AI systems, that you train them. We must teach those AI systems what does a house look like, what does a tree look like, or all sorts of things before they can start helping us and to start generate reliable data. And that is an important thing within the world of AI systems. And actually, this morning, I had a little bit of a clash with ChatGPT. It is launching a new version. I thought, oh yeah, let's start with this new AI system, ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT about myself, Hans van der Woud. Do you know Hans van der Woud of BlackShore? And first, ChatGPT said, well, yeah, I am not really sure. I don't really know Hans van der Woud. Can you elaborate? I asked, well, yeah, do you know Hans van der Woud from the Netherlands? And then ChatGPT said to me, okay, yeah, Hans van der Woud is a CEO of BlackShore from the Netherlands. And he is an investor and has invested several millions of euros in startup companies. Well, fortunately, I'm not yet an investor and I haven't done so. But yeah, this return for ChatGPT, yeah, it wasn't the truth. It was wrong about me in person. And now many people are thinking, okay, what ChatGPT is saying, it is all true. It is all valid. People write articles about it. But I think we should be a little bit critical about using this. And how is it possible that ChatGPT has got it wrong? Well, probably, yeah, the models are very good, which the system is using, but it is as bad as the data set, as the teaching data set. Because, yeah, there somehow ChatGPT has learned at the point, I am an investor. And maybe something has gone wrong somewhere, and we can't really see where it has gone wrong, but something has gone wrong. And that is an important lesson what we need to think of about developing our own AI systems as we are doing right now. But however, yeah, what we are doing, of course, we are not working on ChatGPT, but we are working on detecting objects in satellite images because it is our business, and to generate maps. Maps teach us things about our planet, what is going on. And how are we doing it? Well, we are forging an alliance between man and machine, between crowd and machine. We are using our crowdsourcing system to generate tens of thousands of examples of data labels, like there has been wheat harvested, and put that into a machine or in AI systems, and to automatically map areas. And a very strong point here is that we're not only building a very smart alliance between the man and the machine, but also how we use data. Well, Koen already talked about satellite data, what is available there. Well, there's freely available data and to be used for everyone, open satellite data. But there's also data that you can zoom in a little bit more, up to 30 centimeters. You see greater detail, really good for humans to look at. But this data is very expensive. And and this cost goes up quite dramatically if you map very large regions. But how can you intelligently combine the use of this type of data? And this is what we have been doing. So what we are doing, because humans are really good at looking at the very high resolution details, because we know it from Google Earth. But AI systems are really good at interpreting images already using open data. And I won't go too technical on this, but with the open data does look at images different than what we do with the human eye, but it still needs examples of locations. So what we do with Cerberus, with our crowdsourcing platform on very strategic locations, we are mapping, creating examples with the human eye, but those labels are to be used upon the open and the free data. So we really only buy a tiny amount of very high resolution data. This is really cost effective, and then based on maps using open data, which are far larger, overarching what we have bought, we can still generate maps. And that is really a very great thing. However, with only one of these little data sets, yeah, you aren't there. We want to create a estimation of the impact of climate change of Durham-Woud to the Mediterranean region, and we can't do it with just one little area, because what we found out in the Mediterranean, we think everywhere like the wheat looks the same. It are those little beautiful golden crops growing everywhere, and we know them from pictures, but it is not the same. And what it is as the people living there, how crops are being grown are really diverse. And it can be large scale, it can be small scale, it can be sloppy or on different types of soils, different climate regions. And for this project, we needed to take into account this diversity across the Mediterranean. What we did in the first part of Counter Machine was only to look at Italy and Ethiopia, but creating a data set for Italy alone, we can't really make estimations of the entire Mediterranean region. So what we did is to select regions. We want to create quite some sample areas where wheat is grown throughout the Mediterranean region, strategically select those areas, and then for each area create data labels. So for our eventual maps, we get a far better representation of the wheat yields across everything. And how we started is by looking at climate models. There's not one climate model, there are multiple models, but we thought that it might be good to select regions per type of climate model to do sample areas, like in very wet areas and dry areas. Also to think about like harvest moments. And also it is important to take into account how crops are grown, the diversity, how do farmers manage their crops, and the soil types. Like in the top image here, you see an area in Spain, I think it's in Aragon. It is a province in Spain, how they grow, and the soil is really reddish there. And on the left side, you see how harvested wheat does look like, really red, not that golden color as what we are expecting. But if you look in France, in other areas, like in what was the name? I forgot the name of the area. It is in the Pyrenees. There again, the harvested wheat does really look very different than what it looks like 300 kilometers away. So, and that is important information if you want to really create good machine learning models. And also how fields are organized. Sometimes, like we see olive trees in the fields, or sometimes they are really large and industrial. So based on this, we had to make a selection process of which areas are we going to create the wheat samples. And we created 20 areas. We selected 20 areas across the Mediterranean. Well, we started in Portugal, and what we basically did with our game, we took the gamers on a journey through Europe, starting on Portugal, ending up in Egypt, and all areas which are known for their durum wheat production for the pastas. And so we did. And I want to say we ended up in Egypt, because there in Cairo, because there our game developer company streaming creativity is. So it is really, I wanted to include this area. Anyway, so we started this journey of mapping, and so we set off and we selected 20 locations across the entire Mediterranean zone, and we started to generate data labels and of harvested wheat. And what is important are factors of the timestamp, when is the data label, or at what moment is a satellite image captured, and what did we find? And it can be wheat, but we're also looking for other features which are specific for each region next to the wheat. For example, there's more growing in the Mediterranean, or there are more activities. So secondary, we also mapped other things. And these can be, for example, mining or power grids is what we have mapped, but also other crops like rice, commodities, lavender, a lot of things. And the thing is to gather all of those data labels, and we want to share them as free and open data and share them with the community to start working with our labels, and also, of course, algorithms we are generated. And on this, we are collaborating with ESA, and we want to bring them to the AI for EO platform. It is a platform developed under development with the European Space Agency. So here it is. We created 20 maps or play areas, sample areas, and for each of these areas, it is very important, we needed to create a little bit of an e-learning experience, because we need to teach our players how to map, what to look for. And that is also because of the diversity, how wheat is grown or other crops. And it is incredibly important, and has been an incredibly important experiment, because sometimes we needed to unlearn the crowd things and relearn things, how to recognize wheat. But these are like representations of each areas. We call them e-learning sheets. You're showing examples, what does a feature look like in a certain area. This is, for example, one area in Italy, and in this case we asked the crowd, can you map harvested wheat? Can you look for harvested hay? So that is for feeding livestock, vineyards, olive orchards, mining from space. We also put in a little bit of archaeology, so people can detect traces of the past, which is a personal flavor I added in the game, and it's making the game interesting. Now, how does it work? Well, from the crowd, we combine all of the data, and each click on the map is of value. So each player, if you click something, if you mark if there's a tree or if there's a field, it is of value. And eventually, each of those results are exported back into map applications, and then we can start turning this data into the data labels we need. On getting the eventual labels, what we do in the game, as for gameplay, to keep it user-friendly and fast, we subdivide the game in hexagons. And hexagons are units of analysis, like the game Settlers of Catan. It is a board game you might know. And one hexagon can, for example, contain forest or a field. But there's a trick. A hexagon is quite large in the game, in our case 60 meters in diameters. But as for the data labels, we want to make them smaller. And on this, we do a little bit of a mathematical trick, because if you overlap hexagons vertically or horizontally, 50% offset, shifted, you'll get triangles. And those triangles are eventually what we use, what we count. And as a crowd member or a player, you're not really sure on what hexagon grid you are playing, but the system is eventually calculating triangles, which are the results. And each triangle is an equilateral triangle of 30 meters. So a really small triangle, but it is a data label. And we know on this area, on this time, wheat has been harvested on our planet. And that is really important information to be used, what we are using. Now, these are the only Excel sheets I'm going to share. We have all data available of all of the maps and what has been harvested, which sensor we are using, but the results are what are important, of course. And well, we mapped 20 areas, and each line is an area. And in the top line, you see all of the kind of features which we have mapped across all of the regions. But not in every region each feature was available. For example, maize, we only found in Egypt. We mapped it only out there. Power grids, yeah, we found them a lot, but not in every area. But having this table, we could start counting how many data labels we have generated throughout the project. And what is really impressive, for the durum wheat, we generated 152,000 data labels. And those are a lot of examples of durum wheat, which can be of use, of course. And in total, if you count all of the data labels, we generated more than 236,000 data labels. Now, on the data labels also, we do some quality checks and verification. Is the crowd doing it all right? Because we are humans, we make errors, so we need to think about that. But, and we are thinking of consensus, like if 3 people agree there's wheat, you get a certain accuracy of the data. And if 5 people say there's wheat, there's a higher accuracy. So we count this into, we take this into account and share this with the end results. And, but I'm not going to bore you with these numbers. So this is more visual. So what is the nature of the data that you generate? Well, here you see all of the little triangles projected on the map. And I think this one was in Provence in France. What we mapped here was like natural vegetation. We mapped lavender. These are the red triangles. And we mapped the durum wheat. These are green triangles. And we have done such things for every map, all of the 20 maps, of course, and those results are to be shared as open data, so free for everyone to play around with this data. So that is basically what we have done. What we already found out, that the thing with overarching and the AI systems, that is really working. And so by really strategically selecting what we are doing, using human eye, we can train machines to generate more data in overarching regions. And of course, we still have research questions like the 20 areas which you have selected right now. Is that enough? Is that a good enough representation of the entire Mediterranean? Or do we need more? Or yeah, what is the border of a culture? At what point are people starting to harvest differently than other areas? We saw this, for example, on Cyprus, on the Turkish part and the EU part, they're harvesting at different methods. So you need to take into account both parts to say something about wheat harvest and then the climate impact on this island, which is particularly small. So those are really important questions to ask ourselves. Now, of course, I think it's good to start opening the floor for discussion and your thoughts, of course. But 2 takeaways. We have done this project. This is already an upscaling project of what we have done before. And I think with our system, we are just starting to fill a big knowledge table of data with crowd-generated information. And of course, I'd like to keep doing so to generate more labels. Now we only did the wheat for the Mediterranean, but can we also do it for the north of Europe? But things that are important here, and I hear that a lot among also the AI community or the geospatial community, there's a lot of data, but how can we better represent this data? What should be the future? And also, in this case of, we're all talking about metaverses, virtual representations of Earth. Now, with our game, we have started doing this already 10 years ago. But how can we make this connection even better between our game environment and the real world? And one very important thing is, because yeah, Earth is round, and there are games with a round Earth, but in our game, we cannot fit the entire planet yet. But how can we bridge this connection? And one thing what we want to move to is more standardization, and that is how do we describe our planet as data. And do we need different geospatial systems for this? And in the game, we generate triangles, and triangles, they fit in smaller triangles. So you could have like parent-child relationships of data, of timestamps. And but we need to start working on this, and also to connect all of the data of the worlds that we are mapping with Cerberus. And this is like a projection of Earth, a mathematical projection. They call it an icosahedron. But you can also of this make a round Earth and have a different types of systems to describe our planet and knowledge. And what is very important, it is about data validation. And I started about it, this ChatGPT, there's no validation of how it got my data. And I'm not in agreement with this data, but we treat this data as being true. But satellites help us to validate results. Is there indeed growing somewhere? Are people indeed living in an area? And for this, you could even start thinking about connecting blockchain technologies to these kind of grids to really validate, is our data true? Because on this data, we make decisions, and we all think this data is all correct. And the further the data is being used down into the chain, into the data chain, journey, the more we trust this data. But is this always correct? So yeah, I think with this one, I'm ending my presentation, and probably there are quite some questions. And yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hans. And I'm just to facilitate here. Yes, the floor is open for questions. So please, if you have a question, submit it to the Q&A, which is on the bottom of your screen, and we should be able to see it. So just to sort of recap some of these takeaways. So, you know, Hans and Koen mentioned, you know, the importance of data validity and diversity, and yeah, where that can bring you, and how that is sometimes overseen also by the most trustworthy organizations that we use to get our data from. So that would be, I think, an interesting topic to discuss. The benefits of data standardization for really upscaling, you know, systems, and for really connecting and interconnecting observations is another key point that was mentioned. And ultimately, of course, we also want to discuss, you know, what is the added value for policy here? You know, how can we really move that envelope to support decision makers, also in their intuitive understanding of how technology can really support them. We have a lot of policymakers that are aware of technology developments, but can they really use them in their everyday work to the extent that they can really bring their work to the next level? So that would be, I think, some of the additional thoughts that I would bring to those points. I don't know if Koen, you wanted to add anything while we're collecting those or some questions.
I think those were very good starting questions, Laura. Thanks.
Okay, I'm just checking for. So, well, I'm seeing some interest in the discussion for maybe Hans, you were starting with the point of data standardization. Maybe you can, maybe we can discuss that a little bit more. I don't see a very specific question, but there is interest to develop that idea a little bit. What does it really mean to standardize that data? Can you give an example of where that has yielded benefits?
Well, yeah, what we are finding out with BlackShore, with Cerberus, we have done a lot of projects, of course, and creating data. And now, for example, we had this project with creating the AI data labels. But I want to have each data label, that you can really already know what is the nature of the data label, how is data stored, in what format, what is the shape of the label. And I want each label to be exactly the same, to be exactly just an equally rectangular shape, because it is really a very good match with our game engine. And and to work, and that like a label in Egypt is exactly of the same dimensions as a label in Portugal. And also that if you would have a lot of labels or a lot of triangles, that they eventually connect to the label in Egypt if you try to get them around the globe. And those are just geometries projected on our round globe on parent Earth. And if you know this of several locations, okay, there is wheat growing or there are potatoes growing. But if you also know of super, like right now we have very tiny triangles, but you can also have very large triangle. Like Europe already is a triangle, and we know, it is a big landmass. And in this landmass you have like a small triangle agricultural area, and you can zoom in indefinitely. And it is really helping us to build like some kind of an ontology of our planet Earth, a knowledge system. And on these labels, of course, you can connect more than what we store, and we just need a place to store our crowd-generated data, and I want to share it with the world of our planets. But you can also store other data, local data, how many people live somewhere, or has an investment been done there. And what you must know is that a big part of the world doesn't have a proper address system. And if you look in Africa, we have our addresses, but in a lot of parts they don't have it. And for this, if you would have a uniform system working across the globe, I think that could be of a great benefit. And we are not the first one with this idea. There are also other global grid systems to store information. But we did an evaluation of these, that they do not all really reflect the requirements as we have, especially with our game engine. And of course, we as game developers, we are thinking about this trend with metaverses, and we know that existing systems aren't always working on this, and it would work for us. But what I just foresee is like a big, a planet, a big grid, and this grid is basically just a big knowledge platform, which just fits all. And you can think of these data labels having certain knowledge stored in time, but also in altitude, in scale. And you can even use it to start describing or estimating supply chains. If some coffee is coming from Africa, being grown at a certain farmer who has to deal with certain regulations, there shouldn't have been deforestation, for example. And then you can just check with this data label, okay, what was there? Or sorry, with the triangle, with the location, you can query, has there been deforestation since a certain moment? And if it does, or it doesn't, then you check a certain mark to be allowed to trade with Europe or whatsoever. But I think there's so much data available of all kinds of different formats, different Earth projections. And I think if you really want to understand our planet, there must be some kind of a standard. And I just know that the classical coordinate system, as we are using it, it doesn't really cut it anymore, because it is also very hard to quantify things. And if you have like a set of really uniform shapes, mathematical shapes, it might be easier to quantify things.
Yeah, no, I think Hans, I mean, you know, the potential for improving collaboration around knowledge sharing and you know, data systems is just enormous when you think about these kinds of ideas, and also when you think about the availability of data, and to be able to compare and to share knowledge around how you can improve certain information systems. This is absolutely key. So I think that would be, you know, that point that you make about standardization is really interesting, because you give a very concrete suggestion on how you can start that kind of development. And that ties in, I guess, to a point on data validity and diversity. I think, Koen, you also you know, mentioned in your presentation how important it is to have diversity in your data sets in order to keep improving on the quality of data. Can you say a little bit more about the state right now of this data validity and diversity, and how you think this project has helped you to sort of push forward that thought process?
Yeah, thanks for the good question, Laura. I think that in general, the importance of having good training and validation data for machine learning algorithms is really underestimated. So we often hear from our clients, both from the public space as private sector, that organizations are asking us like, yeah, can't you do something with machine learning, because we don't have a lot of data ourselves, so can you use machine learning? But it's exactly the other way around. You can do a lot with machine learning as long as you have a lot of data. If you don't have data, there are other techniques, but machine learning is then difficult. And then within the realm of machine learning techniques, there are techniques that require more data or less data. So you can also adapt your system based on what is available in terms of data. So for us as a company, we are always looking for the best available ground truth data or golden standards that we can use to help us train our algorithms. And what we believe in this crowded machines project that we are doing, this is really a new way of generating data basically on every place on the world for virtually any type of object or landscape characteristic that you can think of. So crops, but you can also be interested in water bodies or something else. You can acquire the data with the system that Hans is describing, and then those type of data can be used by algorithms that we develop to actually train your algorithm for your specific purposes. And we really see that as a way forward.
Yes, indeed. And I think, you know, I mean, the average policymaker, and you can't really blame this average policymaker, assumes that if you go on a big database of a big international sort of organization that's you know, collecting a lot of information, that data is accurate and that it would support any kind of you know, query that you have. But the reality is, I think very often that we don't really have any way to validate if that data is correct, and sometimes we may wrongly assume that certain databases are accurate and in a way really up to standard. So, do you have any comments about that? What is your experience in that?
Well, in a project earlier, we mapped a very big area. It was in Mali, 10,000 square kilometers. And the task to the crowd was to map the impact of climate change. We compared historical data with more recent data. And our first aim was, can we map ground degradation? So is it getting browner? Is the area looking less fertile? An important thing in this was also community mapping. Where do people live? And if you look, and even more, how do communities grow? And this data we did using free and open data, so you can, it is not as sharp as the 50 centimeter data, but you can clearly see the communities. And over time, you could also see the communities grow a little bit. This is like having like a little bacteria colony in a petri dish, and you look in 3 years, or with bacteria in 3 days, you see a little bit of an increase. So, and that was really nice. I was thinking, well, we are mapping population, and we are mapping where people are, and we are mapping how it is growing. And then I did a little bit of a study around this to compare our data with known population databases. Actually, I was a bit shocked. I was, for example, able to compare our data with data from the World Bank. They have a population database, and it did not reflect our results. And there are other initiatives like WorldPop. It is an open population database, but it is also not representing the results which we got with our game platform. And it was quite an eye-opener. I always assumed that at least where people live, that should be really clear, but it isn't entirely. And there's so much to map and to improve. So I did an assessment on this data, and we found it with open data, and there was only one institution in the world who better knew where people were living than what we found in this case. And the only entity knowing it better than what we did was Facebook. And apparently Facebook has a very good population data model of where the people live on the planet. And they did a one-time exercise using commercial satellite data, which has been incredibly expensive. And they just mapped all of the buildings on the entire planet and got a map and knowing where people live. However, with Facebook, it was a one-time exercise, and I'm really not really sure what Facebook's goal with this is, because they are not really sharing the data, or they don't allow others to use this type of data. But the data is there. However, we did the same exercise. We were just a runner-up with Facebook, and we used free and open data in this case. And moreover, because we compared the data of time, we saw communities growing over time. So we did an additional thing. And of course, the entire target of this project was, okay, we saw communities growing, but we saw the ground degrading. So there was less fertile land, and there were more people being packed together in communities. And of course, those can be indicators for stress within communities. That was the main target of this. But I think we should really be, and I'm not saying that like the World Bank, well, it did not match here the reality at all, but I think it would be good to think of, just to be more critical. How good is this data, what we are using? And I think if we're a little bit critical about this, just do not blindly trust everything. We are really far. And and the data containing all the truths, it is there. The satellite images are there. And and there are just things which we need to improve. And all what we want to do, of course, is understand our planet to our best extent. But it just starts with this first line, this first little stone in the row in the entire chain. And so the methods might be all right, but the data, it is, there are improvements over there, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Hans.
Laura,
Go ahead, Koen.
Yeah, sorry, I saw a question from Charles in the chat, so I thought maybe I can try to answer that one. So it's about the main synergies and differentiators with geospatial information like ArcGIS and others, and do you collaborate with similar platforms? Thanks a lot for that question, Charles. And just for everybody who is not familiar with these type of systems, there are all types of systems available on the market, also open access, by the way. Think about QGIS that provides you the opportunity to integrate and analyze all types of geospatial information. And ArcGIS is actually the largest, the biggest platform out there from Esri. So how it works and how we can work with ArcGIS is basically that at this moment, so Hans with his platform generates this training data using crowdsourced gamification. The training data is then used by companies like us, but also others, to train their algorithms to, for example, make maps of, think about maybe coffee or wheat or any crop that's of interest, or maybe you're interested in multiple types of classifications. That's all possible with these type of technologies. And then basically that output can then be used to, for example, integrate in ArcGIS and then maybe combine with, well, demographic data or any other types of data sets, vector data or pixel-based data, to do your analysis or to provide the information that's required by your clients.
Thanks, Koen. And again, if anyone has any other questions, just feel free to add them to the chat. Just to build a little bit on the policy side of things, I think, what we're seeing clearly is that there is an enormous potential here with the data methods and also what we can already sort of observe. However, we are also different animals that are specialized in different areas, and so to what extent can we start bridging this gap with policy? So how can we use these advanced technologies more effectively in a policy environment? And this is a question for everybody. There's clearly a need and a hunger for increasingly smart information systems to start really grasping all the linkages between the various policy challenges that we are facing. So in order to really make sense and structure our policy priorities, we need to get a faster grip on these really complex issues. And I think data can be a very big source of support there. But as long as policymakers don't have the data literacy, I suppose, to interpret some of these information systems, this will be difficult. To what extent do you think crowds and machines can support policymakers in particular in terms of understanding these kind of complex systems?
Yeah. Maybe I can start to answer that. Yeah. So maybe important to understand is that what we did in crowds and machines is quite fundamental work to improve all types of machine learning based techniques and algorithms, I would say. So there is quite a big gap between what we do between crowds and machines and the policy developer or policy implementer or evaluator. However, what we do as, for example, Fit to Impact, but this also applies to other companies here in the webinar, I guess, is we do provide this type of information products for corporate strategies, but also for policies, in the sense that, take your example, Laura, of food security. Assumes that we, as the Netherlands or any other country, import certain products, maybe certain crops or certain food from countries and regions. It can actually make sense to see, is this still viable in the future? What will change in the near future related to these type of supply chains? And do we have to adapt as a country or as a region to be sure that in the future we still have the food that we need to feed people? That doesn't only apply to, by the way, to European countries, but of course to every country in the world. With the type of technologies that we use, you can actually see where are which crops come from which type of regions, but also what will be the impact of climate change on these on the crop production. And maybe there will be a shift. Maybe the same crops will be produced, but then from other areas. And actually, you can make estimations of that using the technologies that we show today. So that's not only the technologies that we are developing with crowds and machines. You need more. I showed some of those, I think, in my in my presentation, it's really the combination of certain technologies. I'll think about climate modeling that provides you the answers to get informed decision making related to your strategy or your policy.
Yeah, and what I do think on this for policymakers, decision makers, a big deal is in visualization and usability. And if you work with something which is standardized, which everybody can use, like Google, you can start querying for all, like the energy transition in the Mediterranean of Europe, which we have seen. We observed a lot of developments related to power systems and green energy there. And and we populate a certain database with information, and you want to do it in a standardized way. But then if you really are able to quickly access this data or visualize this or cross your information, then you are really far. And then you also give more control to policymakers. How are they looking at their information? And maybe even those visualizations are applications which you can put in a metaverse-like environment, a game-like environment, or run simulations in such environments. And game engines are becoming so powerful, and they are working the other way, of course, to visualize all of this data of our planet in a game environment. It might make policy making easier, running simulations into it. But of course, we are not there yet.
No, thanks, Hans. I mean, I don't see any new questions, but I think that certainly, and also speaking on behalf of the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, when you look at these strategic implications of these the crowds and machines in particular, you can really see how this world is becoming increasingly relevant for really understanding our world today, but also in the future. And I think that we really are laying a new foundation. It's amazing. Well, maybe it's not amazing, but I guess intuitively you don't expect to be already matching Facebook with certain innovations that you do just by changing around your way of collecting information, and also really kind of pushing new ways of recording that. And so that's also kind of, I guess, a call to arms to all of those of you that are interested in this field, to really kind of, think about how you can contribute to this very important field, and really to support, policymakers, decision makers, and all the people that are supposed to, really kind of digest how to start tackling so many of our societal challenges. So I think that we've raised a couple of very important points, and certainly Crowds and Machines, as far as I'm concerned, has laid a foundation for a lot more to be developed. So with that, I don't know, Hans or Koen, if you have any final thoughts that you want to give to our audience before we close today.
Yeah, maybe a question or remark for me would be that if you're interested in anything related to sustainability questions or challenges, or of course climate related challenges, I think we are fully aware that what's provided today is just an overview of some use cases, some technologies, and of course there's much more possible. So if you have any question or think, maybe can you also do this and that, then just write us an email. And we come back to you, and then maybe can plan a call or something to discuss your particular challenge or problem.
Thanks, Koen. Hans?
Well, I think we have quite covered the topic. We have been talking a lot, of course. Yeah, as Koen said, that yeah, you might have questions later. You can email us. I think, as I understand, this will be broadcasted as a YouTube video later, so you can check it back. And yeah, if you have later remarks or questions, then we're of course always reachable. And as for me, yeah, we are just getting started, or we're getting the hang of it, and we can really be pretty proud of the amount of labels being generated, and I'm in particular proud of our own crowd, because our crowd, we present our game as a game among all other games, like in the social media industry, but the crowd really does know the game has a certain purpose. It is real, and I can see in the results they're getting better. And what I saw during Crowds and Machines Part 1, mapping in Ethiopia and Italy, and sometimes people were just, people were making more errors than in the current project somehow. And well, it was a year after the second project, but yeah, some kind of collective training is also going on, and it's really great to see how this works actually. And yeah, those are just really real people helping us. And of course, it is a really nice thing is that we really bring world issues in the living room of the people. And yeah, cartography doesn't stay in this way, yeah, with the experts or in their GIS environments. No, we really make it accessible in a game, and everybody can use it. Even my children of 11 are or 8, sorry, younger. He is helping with the mapping, and this is so great while learning about the planet and those real world changes, seeing what is going on in the Mediterranean or wherever in Africa, and that is just a really great thing about it. But I think the same step, how we present the world to the gamers, immerse them, I think we should similarly immerse decision makers in those areas, in those events. And a game interface can be a good interface for this. And you can then turn off game elements, turn on other elements. It is just basically, of course, an engine to really simulate or represent Earth in a really user-friendly and accessible way. And I think we should really keep up developing this among many angles and many dimensions. So those are my own personal remarks.
Thanks, Hans. And I can only just underscore both of your final thoughts. It's extremely exciting to see how this community, this crowd is also growing. I believe, Hans, what was the final count that you had, or the highest count of participants at one point?
Yeah, mainly like the community on Facebook, we manage it. That is like more than 100,000 right now.
More than 100,000.
Active participation is always much lower, like maybe like 6% or so if you look at active users. But if I look at the counts of the labels, yeah, that is again really very impressive. And you have some players doing like 95% of the work. Yeah, those are always standard things in game, like very few people do most of the work, but eventually you just pack everything together each click, and then you use those results. And for the rest in the game itself, we do not store much demographic because all of the kinds of privacy laws. It will be really interesting to know, of course, which kind of participant is doing the most. I always get those questions, but we do not store that data. And it will be interesting, but yeah, for certain issues and regulations, we do not store all of this personal information.
Well, nonetheless, though, I think we have a good ground to really move forward, and I think in raising awareness and understanding, and to really cross that bridge to decision makers to support the mitigation and adaptation of, in this case, climate change, but also, of course, much broader strategic topics of interest. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. As Hans already mentioned, there is a video, so you can look back at the presentations, and if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We have, we're always interested to hear from you and your thoughts on this increasingly important area of discourse. So thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon on behalf of all of us. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.